Hello and welcome back to the Anime and Manga Worldwide series, where I discuss what otaku culture is like in other parts of the world. Today I won't be covering one nation, but rather a broader region. The reason for this is twofold. One, it's tough to find information about a singular state and the otaku culture, and like many other things in the region, it is intertwined across borders. So I will be discussing the anime and manga culture of the Arab-speaking world, the Middle East and North Africa. Now, it should be noted that perhaps I might do a video on the non-Arab Middle East, so places like Iran, places like Turkey, and such. Just because I feel like it's bound to have a few different contexts, considering that those parts of the Middle East speak different languages aside from Arabic. But yeah, anyway, so the Middle East and North Africa are regions that conjure up many negative images to everyone who lives outside of them. War, authoritarianism, terror. But the social outlook of these places tend to be a lot more complicated, and sometimes we're surprised by the things we may see there. And despite the rather dismal reputation that anime and manga has to older generations and or people who don't consume such media, anime and to a lesser extent manga have surprisingly deep roots in the Arab world. Now, one of the most enduring stereotypes about the Arab world and the Middle East in general is its social conservatism, and it's not entirely untrue. We know all too well how repressive it is to live in Saudi Arabia or Iran, and even the more relatively liberal of Middle Eastern nations, such as the other rich Gulf nations, Jordan and Egypt, have a lot to answer for in terms of the rights of minorities and women. Yet it's important not to paint such a huge, diverse region in such broad coats of paint, as if everything is uniform across the many nations. So, because of the generalizations made about the Middle East, you'd think anime is one of the last things that the region would allow you to consume. Anime's own stereotypes of excessive fan service, disproportionate bodies, and other things that get on people's nerves about the medium don't lend themselves to a successful venture into the Middle Eastern market, in theory. Yet, that region actually loves anime. We gotta remember that anime and manga are extremely broad and diverse mediums, filled with a multitude of genres, themes, styles, and schools of thought. There's more than enough to go around for even the conservative power brokers of the Arab world to find acceptable. So, what series have people enjoyed historically? So, I was unable to find the literal first anime to air in the region, but I know that the first one to gain any sort of mainstream success and recognition was Grandizer. This was a series based on a manga by Go Nagai, adopted into an anime series in 1975 by Toei. This series was dubbed and distributed to the Middle East in the late 70s. Apparently the first to do so was a Lebanese network called Tele Liban. This series is foundational in the mech genre, and its heroic themes, according to Go Nagai himself, perhaps struck a chord with a lot of Middle Eastern viewers due to all the things going on at the time, and the things that happened in recent memory at the time, such as the various conflicts with Israel, the Iran-Iraq War, the Lebanese Civil War, and the Dhofar Rebellion in Oman. Following Grandizer closely, Future Boy Conan, localized as Adnan Walina, was a hit in the Arab world. Future Boy Conan is a Hayao Miyazaki series consisting of 2 anime series and 2 films. It was apparently dubbed and distributed from Kuwait from the Arab Audio and Video Center. It's still considered a classic in the Middle East today. A series that particularly hit close to home was Adventures of Sinbad, a 52-episode anime series that was inspired by the 1001 Nights stories of old, particularly Sinbad the Sailor. It was animated by Nippon Animation and directed by Fumio Kurokawa. Other series that made a big impact on the region include Akakichi no 11, localized as Abtal al-Mala'ib. This was a soccer manga written by the legendary Ashita no Joe mangaka Iki Kajiwara in 1970. It was soon adapted into an anime by TV Tokyo Doga. Speaking of soccer series, by the way, Yoichi Takahashi's Captain Tsubasa was a hit throughout the 80s and 90s in the Middle East. Localized as Captain Majid, the series started in 1981 and was adapted into an anime in 1983 for the first time by Tsuchida Production. Of course, soccer being the #1 sport in the region, these 2 animes were destined to resonate with people. The 90s saw the rise of Dragon Ball as well, and another 90s hit is surprisingly Romeo's Blue Skies, an anime based on a 1941 book, The Black Brothers, by the Swiss Lisa Tetzner. This is a story of 2 boys going through trials and tribulations in Switzerland. Now, going into the new millennium, One Piece, Dragon Ball, and Detective Conan were popular. Apparently, Inazuma 11 was popular going into the 2010s. And according to Crunchyroll, Naruto and Black Clover were the most watched series from Middle Eastern viewers on their site. for the 2010s. Now, considering all these different series that are popular, where can people watch anime in the Middle East? Who broadcasts it? Who distributes it? So because I'm not covering a singular nation, I can't really pinpoint every channel that shows anime. Every country has its own local stations that might cater to younger audiences, usually funded by the state itself in some way. In terms of multi-regional channels, the three I could find are Spacetoon, started in Bahrain but headquartered in the UAE. These guys are the OG anime distributors in terms of regional appeal. They broadcasted a lot of regional favorites dubbed into Arabic. And when I visited Jordan as a kid in 2005, I actually saw a bunch of animes dubbed into Arabic. Funnily enough, the one I remember most was an Arabic dub of Sonic X. It should be said that they don't just do anime, they do American cartoons as well. MBC Action started in 2011 and shows anime at times. They are a channel owned by the Saudi-backed MBC Corporation, but with offices in the UAE as well. Finally, there's Stars Play. This is actually an American broadcast company just named Stars, which has established a popular branch in the Middle East recently, putting anime within their lineup. I believe most of the Middle East has Crunchyroll and Netflix, but of course their versions may differ to ours due to cultural or governmental sensitivities in the differing nations. So it seems the main bankrollers of legal anime in the Middle East are companies out of the Arabian Gulf nations and American companies expanding into foreign markets. Keep in mind, just as every region I've discussed so far, a lot of series that would otherwise be inaccessible to Middle Eastern viewers can be seen through pirating and or VPN usage. Now, what about manga? So the development of manga fandom in the region is mostly tied to the internet and globalization in the last 20 or so years. Of course, any anime or manga fans can find their fix through pirate sites, but in terms of legal options, the outlook is quite interesting. So, it should be noted that since English is a common second language in most Arab nations, it's not super weird to imagine a lot of fans actually just settle for English publications. Kinokuniya is a popular Japanese bookstore with a UAE branch, where Middle Eastern fans can buy popular manga in English. There's also the Virgin Megastore, which is a hilarious place to buy manga from. That also has an Emirati website. There's also other common options like Amazon, Viz, and Crunchyroll's manga app. In terms of manga translated into Arabic, I read of a Syrian student who translates Japanese manga into Arabic and distributes it to other people, Ubaida Kasuma. Recently, the Saudi Research and Media Group signed a deal with Kodansha to translate some of their mangas into Arabic, as well as enter into a collaborative partnership to create Saudi comics in the common style of manga. This apparently marks the first official Arabic translation of Japanese manga publications. So, how exactly has the high otaku arts influenced the local scene? Well, it's tough to imagine pre-existing media ever really being challenged in a major way. Egyptian cinema in the Middle East and North Africa is basically a juggernaut, with the potential to make even Hollywood and Bollywood sweat a little. Not to the point of being overtaken or challenged really, but in knowing if they ever want to break into the MENA market, they'll have to negotiate with the gatekeeper in Egyptian film. Nonetheless, in our globalized society, almost anything can be popular anywhere. Subtitled Hollywood films are pretty popular in the Middle East and have influenced the local film scene on multiple occasions. I mean, there's a whole subset of Egyptian films, which are essentially remakes of American films, but localized to Arab culture. Now, I don't want this to give the impression that Arab shows and movies are just rip-offs. I mean, my knowledge is scarce, but since I grew up in an Arab household, I saw my fair share of really cool stuff. Whether they be drama or comedy out of Egypt, or perhaps my parents' home country of Jordan, and a few things out of the Arabian Gulf as well. Now, something I didn't know before doing research for this video is the growing scene of Middle Eastern anime and manga. A bunch of creators have taken it upon themselves to make things inspired by that good weeb stuff that we love so much. One of the first ones I remember hearing about back at my teen years was an Emirati project called Torkaiser, an anime-style show inspired by the various mech anime that have shaped the popular imagination. I don't think it ever materialized, unfortunately, while more recently a joint project between the local Saudi studio Manga Productions and the world-famous Toei Animation birthed the 2021 anime film known as The Journey. This film features the main characters defending the holy city of Mecca from invasions during the Middle Ages, inspired by local Arabian folklore. Those same two studios teamed up 3 years previous to create The Woodcutter's Treasure. Now, on the manga side of things, another successful joint venture saw Emirati writer Qais Sedki team up with mangaka and illustrators Akira Himekawa, a female duo going by a singular pen name akin to Adachi Toka, in order to create the Gold Ring manga. This manga is about the popular Gulf sport of falconry. in which a falconer hunts and performs with a falcon, hawk, or other similar birds of prey. Another notable person I found was the illustrator Jassim al-Muhannadi, out of Qatar, who creates manga-style work on a regular basis, and according to al-Muhannadi himself, he also blends American comic styles to create a unique hybrid of genres. Most interestingly, however, I discovered an entire genre of comics. This genre mainly proliferates within Algeria.
The comic books are published in French and colloquial Arabic. Publishers hope to release them soon in North Africa's Berber language.
It is called DZ manga. Inspired by Japanese manga, local creators have created an entire genre of Algerian-made manga all to themselves. Furthermore, it's not just a niche. It has a large and dedicated fanbase among Algerian youths, both guys and girls as well at near equal measure. These DZ manga are sold on street corners and formal bookstores. It is probably one of the most unique instances of otaku-inspired local culture, perhaps only being bested in terms of influence relative to their nation by Chinese anime-esque and manhwa and American anime-esque animations and comics. It isn't 100% recognized by mainstream Algerian culture, mostly because of the generational gap, but it's basically an undeniable part of the culture, whether you want to admit it or not. So I'm gonna throw in my own 2 cents of speculation as to why this genre has taken off in Algeria to this extent. First, we need to discuss Algeria's geography. It is situated just under France, and a majority of the nation lives in the more hospitable northern region. Algeria's complex relationship as a former colonial possession of the French Empire and its sharing of the French language as a result made France a popular destination for Algerian emigrants. France was one of the first European nations in which anime and manga truly took off in a major way. There was a time in France when manga outsold virtually every other form of literature in the 90s and early 2000s. Even today, it remains one of the nations in which otaku culture is strongest outside of Japan. When you think of the many Algerian immigrants bringing back and mentioning French culture to their families back home, perhaps manga was one thing that really meshed well with the people there. I think that another thing that's contributed to the popularity of the genre may be Algeria's varied cultural outlook. The nation's population consists not only of Arabs inhabiting mostly the north, but of the Amazigh people, and approximately 10 million or so of them. These people are indigenous to North Africa with a distinct culture and language, and they've been in a struggle with the governments of Algeria, Morocco, Libya, and Tunisia for decades, trying to gain recognition and integration into society. Southern Algeria also consists of the Tuareg people, a famously independent-minded set of tribes whose nomadic culture transcends borders and is present across most of North Africa and some of West Africa. When you combine those people with emigrants bringing ideas back from France and Europe, it's violent independence that has shaped the popular consciousness, as well as frustrations with Algerian authoritarianism and political instability, you get a population that seems relatively open to new forms of media and various forms of expression. This probably applies to some of Algeria's North African neighbors as well. It's probably no coincidence that the 2 most expressive bastions of soccer supporters in the Arab world are usually agreed upon to be Morocco and Algeria. It should be noted that Algerian DZ manga is also thought to be varied in its subject material as well, tackling localized issues and more general themes common in comics and manga, as well as exploring the diverse culture of Algeria through its illustrations and stories. So, this video is more of a brief overview because there are so many different independent nations involved, all diverse in their own way. It's tougher to get into detail, but I feel like I did the best I could while also not letting this video be 500 years long. Thanks so much for watching everyone, and have a great day.